The man who does more than he is paid for will soon be paid for more than he does. In the heart of a bustling city, William sat at his desk in a small office, glancing out the window at the world moving around him. He was working hard, but something didn't feel right. He felt drained, exhausted by endless conversations, meetings, and promises that never seemed to get him any closer to his goals. It wasn't that he wasn't working hard, it was just that he wasn't seeing the results he wanted. He had big dreams, but the more he spoke about them, the less he seemed to accomplish. He was constantly busy, but not productive. It was as if the act of talking about his plans had become his substitute for actually working on them. He was trapped in a cycle of telling everyone his ideas, seeking approval, and chasing validation, but at the end of the day, he had little to show for it. He had lost his focus. One evening, after a long day, William stumbled upon a quote that made him pause. "Silence is the source of great strength." It was from a book by a man who had been long admired for his thoughts on success, Napoleon Hill. The words struck a chord in him. Silence. He had been so focused on talking about his ambitions, but he had neglected the simple yet powerful principle of quiet action. The more you talk about your plans, the less time you have to work on them. William's life had become a blur of noise, constant chatter about what he was going to do, who he was going to meet, and how he would change the world. He had forgotten that real success doesn't come from talking about your dreams, it comes from taking consistent, quiet action. Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, had been teaching people this for decades: speak less, do more, and success will follow. Hill understood that those who keep their goals to themselves and work relentlessly toward them will ultimately be the ones who achieve success, not those who constantly boast about their plans. William felt the weight of this realization. For so long, he had been running in circles, spending his energy on talking, on seeking approval instead of focusing on actual work. He realized he needed to break free from this cycle. If he wanted to win big, he had to focus on doing, not talking. The power of silence and focus. The next morning, William made a decision. He would stop talking about his ambitions and focus on taking action instead. He would no longer share his goals with everyone, waiting for validation or praise. He would keep his thoughts to himself, and instead of wasting time talking, he would use his energy to create, build, and achieve. He began to see that success is silent, and it's the people who do the work without seeking attention who ultimately achieve greatness. Hill's teachings reinforced the idea that silence is a form of power. When you keep your plans to yourself and let your actions speak for you, you gain a certain level of respect and authority. People don't trust empty words. They trust results. By doing the work, rather than talking about it, William could command respect through his actions, not his promises. The person who takes the most action, with the least amount of talk, always wins. It wasn't easy. William had to break the habit of talking about every idea that popped into his head. He realized that he had been seeking reassurance from others, asking them to validate his plans and decisions. But by speaking less, he began to feel more in control of his thoughts and actions. He focused on creating, solving problems, and delivering results without the constant distraction of talking, doing more and winning big. As the days passed, William began to feel a change. His productivity skyrocketed. The noise in his head quieted down. He was no longer wasting time in endless conversations that led nowhere. He had a laser-like focus on his work, and the results spoke for themselves. People began to take notice, not because he was talking about his ambitions, but because they could see his commitment and work ethic. William's life began to shift in ways he couldn't have imagined. His business began to grow, and his personal development flourished. He learned that success doesn't come from being loud or selling yourself constantly. It comes from doing the work consistently and quietly. And as his actions began to speak louder than words, opportunities began to open up for him in ways he never expected. Success comes from doing the thing that most people aren't willing to do. William realized that the power of silence wasn't just about keeping quiet, it was about focusing on the task at hand without distractions. Speaking less, doing more, and winning big became his new mantra. By focusing on his goals and putting in the hard work, he found that not only was he achieving success, but he was also growing in confidence and strength. His business started attracting the right clients, and his network of supporters grew organically. He didn't need to tell anyone what he was going to do anymore, they could see it in his actions. Doing the work quietly led to massive rewards, and the success that once seemed out of reach was now within his grasp. The lesson of silence and action. As William's life transformed, he couldn't help but reflect on the most important lesson he had learned. Silence is the secret to success. When you stop talking about what you're going to do and start actually doing it, success comes naturally. People may talk a big game, but it's those who show up day in and day out without needing validation or applause who truly win in the long run. In a world that's filled with constant noise and distractions, silence allows you to think clearly. It allows you to focus on your goals and make meaningful progress without being sidetracked by the opinions and expectations of others. The most successful people are not those who talk the most, but those who act with determination and humility. The successful man will profit from his mistakes and try again in a different way. William understood that it wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. By remaining focused and determined and allowing his actions to speak for him, he became a true example of the principle that silence equals strength.